The three adults police want to speak to over the death of Sara Sharif are tonight returning to the UK from Pakistan. The 10-year-old was found dead and alone at her home in Woking last month. And since then, it was discovered that her father, stepmother and uncle had left the country. Joining us in the studio, former Met Police Detective Peter Bleksley. Thank you, Peter, for coming. And Home Affairs correspondent Danny Shaw. Good to see you both here. Maybe we'll start with Danny, and maybe he could tell the story and tell us really what we know so far, because this is the most perturbing, disturbing and desperately upsetting situation. This beautiful little girl has been killed. I don't know what else we know or don't know.
Well, Surrey police have launched a murder investigation, and they launched that investigation about a month ago when they were called to the house where Sara was living in Woking, and they found her body there, but there was no one else in the house. What they then discovered was that three individuals had left the UK for Pakistan a day earlier, and they wanted to speak to those three individuals, Urfan Sharif, his partner Beinash Batool, and his brother Faisal Malik.
So this is her father, her stepmother and her uncle.
Effectively, yeah.
Yeah.
And they wanted to speak to those three individuals. Meanwhile, they've been carrying on an extensive investigation to try to piece together what's happened. We know from the inquest that Sara suffered really serious injuries, some sustained injuries, serious injuries over a sustained period of time, and that police are treating this as murder. In the meantime, what's been going on in Pakistan is that Interpol, together with the Foreign Office, the National Crime Agency, police in Pakistan and Surrey police have been trying to locate these three individuals. Two of them surfaced last week on a video in which Beinash Batool basically said, we want to cooperate with the British, but we're worried about how we're going to be treated by the Pakistanis. Then this week, the five other children who are Sara's siblings, including her biological brother, were all taken into a government care facility because they had also gone to Pakistan with the three adults.
Yes.
And today we've learned that the three of them have finally boarded a flight from Pakistan to the UK. It's heading towards Gatwick, and they have stopped in Dubai, stop over there, and we believe they're heading into Gatwick and should arrive in the UK tonight.
Right. And Peter, this sounds like a delicate, difficult police operation involving different continents and all different sorts of police forces. Can you tell us a little bit about how something like this comes about, how they organise it?
Certainly, it's when detectives become diplomats in many regards, and thus far, this story is a triumph of detective diplomacy.
Yes.
Because the pressure that's been brought to bear by press conferences and such like has come to fruition, and these people now are returning of their own free will to the UK. I'm sure there will be a party to greet them at the steps of that aeroplane.
Yeah.
The case would appear to be quite complex because the post-mortem, whilst it did reveal that injuries sustained by Sara were multiple and excessive, it didn't actually pinpoint a direct cause of her tragic death. So, possibly in the future, there may be a second post-mortem. We don't know yet. But what I think will become obvious at some stage in the future is that the scene, the house where Sara was found dead, may give up its secrets. Crime scenes very often do.
Can you posit any kind of theory, either of you, about why these three individuals are coming back? Because various people have said, I mean, obviously it's anecdotal, obviously it's people's opinions, I understand that completely, but have said that, you know, having travelled to Pakistan, they would have thought it would be relatively easy simply to disappear. Just, you know, not to be found, not to get back on a plane, not to come back for any sort of day of reckoning, let alone a trial.
I think their options were basically limited. I don't think there was anything else they could do.
They couldn't just disappear.
The net was closing in. It's not one person who's gone to Pakistan and disappeared in that vast country and is not making contact with anyone. These are three people who have claimed, certainly there have been some claims, you know, we want to cooperate, we want to help, and if there's an explanation, they're being urged by their relatives to make yourselves known, come and account for what happened, explain what happened. And I think the pressure was building and building and building. They couldn't really go out, make themselves public. Perhaps their supplies were becoming very restricted, and I think they were losing support. And so I think pressure from all sides meant that this was the only thing they could do.
Peter, are you surprised that and you said particularly they come willingly, they've got aboard that plane, they are coming back. Does that surprise you? Would you have thought, given that only the other day we were discussing the fellow that escaped from Wandsworth prison by binding himself, we think, underneath a food vehicle and using bed sheets, you would have thought, in Pakistan somehow there'd be somewhere being spirited away.
Well, I think the media deserve great credit for the part that they've played in spreading the word
It's good
globally.
to hear that. Don't often hear that. Good to hear that.
Absolutely. And the police often criticise the media.
Yeah.
But I'm sure in this regard, like they were with Daniel Khalif, for example, they were very grateful of the assistance that the media gave. And I'm sure that has played a significant part. It's very different to the man who was recently brought back to the UK from Pakistan, who was wanted for the murder of Sharon Beshanevsky, a police officer who was shot some 18 years ago. A very different case. That person went to ground and was very difficult to find, and it took years and years. So it is very different. Of course, they did travel with 5 children.
Yes.
3 adults, 5 children. That's a sizable party. That's going to stand out. It's very difficult to hide that number of people. The pressure has been sustained. The pressure has undoubtedly delivered results, and I look forward to them landing in the UK and seeing how the investigation proceeds from there.
Right. And does this strike you as a kind of standout case, an unusual thing, spiriting an entire family to Pakistan, an empty house with a dead little girl in it? It's the most peculiarly disturbing and disquieting story, isn't it?
It's a really disturbing, tragic story, particularly because we know that there were some concerns, I think, raised about Sara beforehand. I mean, that's another whole angle to this, which I'm sure will be explored in a review. But now the really important thing is to sort of let the police do their work, do their investigation, question these 3 individuals, which I'm sure they will do, as soon as they're on British soil, and proceed with their investigation. But as Peter rightly says, it is significant that the pathologist is one of the best pathologists, by the way, that carried out the post-mortem, Dr. Nat Carey. He couldn't come up with a definitive cause of death at the moment. There's more tests being conducted. It may take more time, but that could be a complicating factor.
Desperately sad story. Thank you both very much indeed for coming in.